Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of After Wednesday. I am your host, Jeffrey Hayes. As always, welcome back. We had some technical difficulties getting started tonight, but that's okay because that shit happens. It's technology, and I can almost guarantee 9 times out of 10 it will fail you, and it will make you just feel silly, and hopefully everything is syncing up now, which I think it is, which is great. If you're tuning in tonight on Google Plus, Q&A is enabled. You should see a little box down there where you should be able to ask a question of my guest, who I'll get to here in a moment. As I mentioned in the last interview I did 2 weeks ago with Charles Forsman, I don't take questions on Twitter anymore because it's hard for me to coordinate and really give my guests the attention they deserve. Once I figure out a better system, I will start taking questions on Twitter, but I'll let everyone know when that can happen. But if you're not joining us tonight from Google Plus, but you're from a remote player where I've dropped a link somewhere, or my guest has dropped a link, welcome as well. And speaking of my guest, let's get to him tonight. Very excited to have Ryan Ferrier here with me. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll jump right into it with some questions of my own for you.
Please do.
How did you get started as a letterer in comics? Could you sort of clarify for people what that specific role is? I think it's a very important role, and the importance of it in the comics medium.
Yeah, it's I mean, I get asked all the time what lettering exactly is. If you're not really into comics, then that's kind of a weird thing to tell people. You know, at first they're kind of like, what is that, like writing? And you're like, well, no, writing's different.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of the process of it, it's the last step of the creative, usually, and that's just putting the balloons and the words and the sound effects in, and the best. Doing the job properly entails that you don't really notice lettering, and that the book is totally readable. So how I got started was my first comic book called Terminals, which ran online for 2 years from Penny Farthing Press, and it was just me and 2 other creators doing it, and my editor at the time was just like, hey, do you want to letter it? And I think they asked me because my day job was graphic design for like over 10 years, so it was kind of like, yeah, you know how to design, so it should be a walk in the park, which I soon discovered that it most certainly isn't. It's a completely specific skill set, and it requires, there's a bit of a learning curve. There's an art and a technique to it. So that's I got dropped in, hit the ground running with the lettering. So I went back and actually re-lettered that series because my lettering was so terrible to begin with. But that's how I got kind of started. I was kind of forced into it, and from then I do enjoy it a lot. It's a part of the making the comic process that allows me to be involved with it, and also to kind of chill out a little bit. Like I still do a lot of lettering as well as writing because I can still work on comics, and I can also kind of tune out, listen to music. Like I still focus. I'm not phoning it in, but it's a more it's a more chilled out part of the job, and it's fun. I enjoy it. It's really cool to watch things come together and be a part of the other people's creative teams. Like I get to letter books for all sorts of other people, so it's something I still do. And for a while, and it's also helped me kind of, make my way around the industry and introduce people to myself and my work. So it's been helpful in that regard too.
When you letter other people's books, what do you take away from that process? What sort of valuable tools have you learned?
Oh, I tell you, I've learned so much in regards to writing from lettering than from anywhere else. Like I've learned so much about my own scripts from lettering my own work. namely that a lot of it sucked. Why did I write this like this? But it's really interesting to letter other people's work, because it allows me to see, a more detailed version of their process, and how they pace their stories, and how they do their page layouts and their dialogue and stuff like that. So it really lets me kind of explore that, because I get to see the script and the art. So it really, I take a lot from that, and I study that whenever I get the chance.
So you said you began that your background is you were working as a graphic designer. How did you fall into that? Or was that something you went to school for, that you sort of applied yourself, or?
Yeah, that was something that I never thought that comic books or making comics could be a viable career at the time. And so, I think like a fair amount of people, you put your eggs into a different basket, and you go to school, and you get a very expensive piece of paper and a proper quote unquote job. So that was my job. That was the kind of path I took. And then after a few years of doing that, that's when I started doing comics in like 2008. So I happened to do both until now. So, and now I've made the shift to full-time comics. So yeah, that was just kind of how it went,
With the shift to full-time comics, how hard was that decision to really make? I mean, it seems to me sometimes it obviously has to be a gigantic leap of faith, even if you're writing consistently, or you're drawing consistently, or you're doing both, or self-publishing. How did you? It takes guts, man. Like that's.
Yeah, no, it's terrifying, and there's so many people that have had much more work and much more of an immediate volume of work than me, that still work a day job. And I think that I had many hang-ups, because I've only been doing it for a month. Like, I quit my job a month ago. So, and the big hang-up for me was like, have I earned, to be able to do comics full time? Like, on paper, not really, but I think at some point you have to take a leap of faith, like you said, and it's totally terrifying. I was in a bit of a different situation, because there was some kind of weird stuff with my day job. Like, the company I was working at got sold to another company, so I essentially started a new job. And not that I didn't like the new job, but it was kind of like life gave me that little window of like, hey, well, if you're going to do this utterly terrifying, crazy leap of faith, there's probably not a better time than now to kind of do it. So I just decided to do it. And I mean, I got a bunch of stuff happening this year, but it's that's the thing about comics. I think it's you got to think a year ahead. So it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of hustling, so to speak.
And along with that leap, you also you began your own your own comics publishing with Challenger Comics, and I want to ask you this. Challenger Comics is your own comics line online, and I'm about to bring it up for everybody who's watching to see. And you've published your own work like Tiger Lawyer and the Brothers James and other things. And what has this sort of process been like, trying to create and publish your own work digitally?
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because we're actually planning on a big relaunch really soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and so it's going to be huge, and there's going to be so much new stuff and totally new like branding, and it's going to be really, really big. And we're really excited about it. So that's coming in a few months, or within a few months at the latest. But I think that came from a time when I was pitching too much too soon, and kind of expecting too much too soon. and you get hung up on just pitching and pitching and pitching to publishers, and it doesn't really go anywhere unless you have a little bit of a body of work to throw under your hat. So I took some time off, and I just focused on self-publishing and learning and writing and creating as much as I could. And then so once I had kind of a nice selection of stuff to display, I I kind of counted like an imprint, and you see so many creators do the imprint thing, and that's totally great.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started, just kind of all the people I talked to and all the people doing the exact same thing, and I thought, well, it makes a lot of sense to kind of unify this and make it a centralized place for people to, have their work available for people to buy or to read for free. So it kind of just grew really naturally from there, and it became more of a collective mentality as opposed to a self-publishing thing. And I say collective because we don't want to necessarily act as a publisher, because we still want to work with that whole do-it-yourself kind of thing. And we like to feel that everyone involved with Challengers, all on the same page, and they're all invested in the same thing. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And I mean, in the last year, we've slowed down a lot on posting and putting out new stuff, and I think that's just because everyone involved is so busy, and everyone is really, getting a lot of bigger work, which is really cool. So we're finally at the place now where we're regrouping, and we're actually working really hard to poise ourselves for the inevitable relaunch that's coming up pretty soon.
Were you more of an indie zine type of reader growing up, or did you embrace everything? What sort of influenced you in comics?
I was kind of all over the map, but I mean, I definitely, I was like a Marvel DC kid for sure. Like, I grew up with the superhero comics, but I also, because my whole family's Scottish, and they used to send me all their like weird Scottish comedy like English comics and stuff like that. So like I was kind of exploring the comedy stuff at the same time, and I also remember reading like lots of Ralph Snart books, like just really gross out kind of weird comics. And so I think I kind of took the best of everything from all those parts. But yeah, no, I still grew up like a really Spider-Man kid and stuff like that.
It's interesting you mentioned that about sort of these UK comics. You embrace a lot of different genres in your writing, and quite fearlessly so. As I was getting ready for this interview, and going back and reviewing them, but you really gravitate strongly towards humor.
Yeah.
And what comedic or humorous work has had such a great impact upon your sort of comedic sensibility?
Oh man, that's a very good and very difficult question. I think I like subtle, dry kind of comedy, but at the same time there's a maturity to that kind of comedy, but I also like really immature comedy, like gross out jokes, and like the best part of Ren and Stimpy were those close-ups with nasty painted like insides of nostrils and stuff like that. But
yeah.
So like that's kind of my thing, but I also think that like Naked Gun and like Airplane, that kind of like spoof satire stuff is just dumb comedy. It kind of really like hit me as a kid, and I think a lot of that kind of shows through Tiger Lawyer with like the puns and taking like mature settings and making them completely ridiculous. Yeah, it's basically like really subtle, like depressing life stuff mixed with farts and boners. Is pretty much it's pretty much my bread and butter.
Well, it's weird because like when you read Tiger Lawyer, you've done this really nice balancing act where one part of a story will be you sort of embracing the cartoonish, fart and boner, gag a minute type and punny type material, and then the second half is very noirish and a bit more serious. And you even, I really appreciated it. I was showing someone else it at work, and I was talking to them about it, and I said, what really blows me away about this is that he knows to make that conscious decision to even switch visual style, right?
Yeah.
That's some people don't have that in the, and it's just like he obviously realizes that, oh my God, this tone is completely different. This would be ridiculous if I did the noir stuff in sort of this cartoony way, and it just wouldn't fit and be the same. Do you, when you sit down with something like, when you sat down and started working on Tiger Lawyer, was it initially going to be just a gag-driven book, or did the other type of story that's in there sort of evolve out of it later?
Yeah, I mean the story behind Tiger Lawyer was so weird in that I never really planned to do it as a comic at all to begin with. Like it was one of those things where I wrote I think it was a 6 or 10 page. It was the goofy half of the first issue. I wrote the script in like an afternoon, and I was like, oh, this is clever. It's cute. So I put the script on Tumblr, not planning at all to do any comic, and then people really dug it. And Matt McRae, whom I love dearly, sent me. He drew the character, and he was like, oh, this is awesome. And so from there we kind of, we're talking about it, and I was like, well, shit, let's just do it, So that kind of came to be, and it was really awesome. And then I just started writing little bits and pieces of the character, and I found him to be really, really, really adaptable to anything. So I started kind of messing around with this noir vibe. And at the time, I had just met Vic Malhotra, whose work I love. And he's got that more, it's kind of grittier, it's kind of more real. It's basically not at all like Matt's, really illustrative, colorful things. So we got paired together, and we just, we decided to take that second half more into Vic's territory, and it made for a really nice, contrast, and we had our issue soon enough.
Yeah. And I've pulled up here on the screen. I'm trying to show people the contrast between the two different types, or the two different ways the character's rendered, based on the story. In the first instance here, we have the more sort of cartoonish one, and then in the second instance, the more Mad Men-esque Raymond Chandler one.
Yeah.
But, you have coming up to. I'll shift gears here just a little bit. Dave has been published digitally by Monkey Brain, and it's about to be published in print by IDW. Is the first issue this week, or is it?
It was supposed to be this week, but they've had shipping problems on the West Coast, I think.
Oh, that's right. The strike. That's right.
Yeah, the strike. So that's actually going to be next Wednesdays when issue 1 comes out.
Okay. In print.
In print.
Right. And so Dave began digitally. What was the process of putting Dave together, and how was it different for you than from your other work?
I think Dave was like I've written a whole anthology of shorts, and I'd written the Tiger Lawyer stuff, and that was all awesome. But I think Dave was the first kind of work that I had done that was really more of a personal. It had a ton of personal stuff in it, and it had a lot more of a message, and we were actually trying to say something with it. And so, I mean, I think with that, the process of working on it with Valentine was really, cathartic, but also it was really meaningful, and he and I just clicked immediately, and it's just I learned a lot about the process just working with him, and you know, so it was really great in that regard. So it was very different from making tiger puns. Like so, it was really, it felt great, and it was challenging in all the good ways, and it was just a lot of fun to kind of. And I think going back to my kind of clashing senses of humor, I think that Dave's really meaningful while having a lot of like fart and dick jokes in it. So kind of like I'm kind of like, oh man, I hope I didn't peak with Dave, like, because that's the best of everything. Like,
Well, it's hard to come down from robot masturbation, so you know.
yeah, yeah. I feel like we didn't do enough.
Yeah.
Regret.
You said you just mentioned too that Dave sort of represented your most personal work, and that you're sort of proud of. What was that coming from an office type job or an office type environment? Because I felt that a lot of the appeal of Dave as someone that's worked in offices as well, is just like it's the same way I feel about Office Space, the movie, that it's so universal that you can throw it in such different genres or scenarios. Obviously, in this we're talking science fiction and speculative science fiction, comedic science fiction, and you still hit emotional beats in it that everybody goes, oh shit, I have that. I think my favorite thing in Dave is his boss, who constantly goes, you know, I hate you, right?
Yeah, he just needs to reaffirm that he hates everyone. I think that's inherent with the majority of bosses, that they feel they need to remind you.
Yes, to remind you what a complete waste of space you are, and that they can't believe that they have to put up with you. And
yeah.
There's small things, and I think that's what's really, to me at least, and the people that I've talked to on Twitter and different message boards about Dave, is that we all sort of connect. While we do enjoy the humor of it, we also enjoy that aspect of communal feeling, like we've all been there. And I kind of want to ask you about this. As I was reading it and sort of taking some notes on it, I couldn't help but wonder about your own feelings about that behavior is sort of adaptive, and that you make some really, really strong, persuasive points about that. No matter what the species is, or whether organic or inorganic, that the species will somehow mimic that it conquers. And I was kind of wondering, where did you start thinking about that?
I mean, I think a lot of that comes from when you're young, and you've got that rebellious streak, and you're a warrior, so to speak, and then you kind of get old, and you start your job, and it kind of sucks the life out of you. But I think that it's, by the robots falling into the kind of apathy of the human stereotype, I think we also do that as well. I did that. Like, I used to be a really cool dude, and now I get more pleasure from canceling plans than making them. So I think that we end up kind of falling into these traps, whether they're kind of conscious decisions or not. We kind of fall into these traps, and I think that Dave has done that a little bit different, because Dave has been, he's been told to do this other job, and there isn't a war, so all the robots have been kind of more naturally fell into these traps. But I think we totally do that as people, and I think that even though we've fallen into these traps and these slumps, we still kind of have to be accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a large part of Dave isn't so much about, he hates his job or he misses punching aliens. I think a huge part of Dave is that he's become kind of a shitty dude, and he's made some pretty he's been a bad, he's made bad choices, and
Yeah.
his choices have affected other people. And so even though he's in that slump, he's still accountable for it. So I think a huge part of the overall arc of the character is him coming to the realization that he's kind of a garbage dude sometimes, even though he's the hero. But I think that that's really important for humans. I think that's a real tough thing for humans to do, is to kind of take responsibility and accountability for those slumps sometimes.
Now Dave was originally first introduced through Monkey Brain, and you are the third or fourth person I've had on that has published with Monkey Brain, and I was wondering if you could talk about that experience, because I'm desperately trying to get Chris or Allison or both of them on to do the show, because they absolutely fascinate me. That not only do they put out such high quality books at such a pace, they just seem to have such an open policy about creating and publishing the work that you want to do. Can you talk about how Dave got into their hands? Or
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll just start by saying that Chris and Allison are just amazing people, and they're super, super encouraging, and they are so excited about a new, unique work, and about creators kind of pursuing their passion projects. So Valentine and I were just super lucky to be able to do Dave at Monkey Brain. So we actually started Dave in 2012, believe it or not.
Okay.
And we did the pitching thing for a while, Valentine and I, and we had a couple close calls, but we didn't stick it nowhere really. We didn't get that green.
Right.
And, at the end of the day, I mean, it's worked out awesomely. So we couldn't be more happy. So we kind of, we pitched it what we could, and then eventually I was lettering a bunch of books at Monkey Brain. Like I lettered Skybreaker and Theremin, and so yeah, I just got to talking with Chris, and Valentine and I were just like, yeah, why don't we see if we can tell our story, because I think Dave's always been something that he and I like have to tell. We had to do this. So I mean, we would have done the full series somewhere somehow, but fortune smiled upon us, and Chris really dug it, and Allison really dug it. So they let us do it. And I mean, working with them is great. They're really hands off in the best possible way, in that they're not in the business of telling other people how to do their comics, and I think with Valentine and I, we were both firing on all cylinders all the time, and so it just worked out for the best, and they were great. Monkey Brain's awesome.
Yeah, I've begun to feel a bit like they are. Mark Maron always goes on about Lorne Michaels, and I'm beginning to feel that way about how I go on about Monkey Brain. Like I just feel like, in a historical context, that 5 or 10 years from now, we're all going to look back and we're going to see that Monkey Brain sort of laid the way for so many people, and that gave so many great people like yourself and Kurt Pyers and other people just such great opportunity to put one-of-a-kind books out. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get over that. Anyway, speaking of books coming out, you've got a couple books getting ready to come out soon. Curb Stomp. You're also taking on Sons of Anarchy.
Yep.
At Boom. What can you tell us about these two projects exactly?
Well, they're both a lot of fun, and they're really great. But no, Curb Stomp's, it's my first creator-owned book with Boom, and it's something that we've been working on for quite a while, and Boom's been really good to me, and we, took the time to find the right project that fit, and we couldn't be more excited about Curb Stomp. And that's Devaki Nyogi is the artist on that, and she's amazing, and it's just been a really, really great, fun project to kind of explore a world that is very much like ours, but has a lot more girl gangs and street fights and machetes and stuff like that. So it's really bright and bold and fun, and there's humor in it, but it's also really violent and gritty, and we tackle some very sensitive, very real kind of issues. And so it's something that's really important to everyone involved in terms of what we're saying and what we're trying to show, while also making it a real kick-ass street gang kind of adventure survival book.
Yeah. With when I saw your solicit for Sons of Anarchy, I was kind of curious, and then it made complete sense when I read the Brothers James.
Yeah.
How daunting is it to take on sort of this existing property that has its own universe and its own rules, sort of already established? Yeah,
totally. It's a challenge. It's a totally different challenge than like anything Creator Run, where you can just do whatever you want. But it's been so much fun working on Sons of Anarchy, and I think that the world that the Sons kind of exist in, and the characters that exist in it, are really, they're all so intricate, and they're very different, and there really is a lot of freedom. Like when we were coming up with the various story arcs, there wasn't a lot of rules, so to speak. There wasn't like, well, you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this. It was like the whole team is just like, well, what kind of Sons of Anarchy story do you want to tell? And there's a lot of Sons of Anarchy stories I want to tell, just because it's cool. It's so cool. I love everything about it. So, although it's daunting because you want to make sure everything fits in its place, I think it also helps to have those limits, because it helps you steer the characters and what they want and the story along. But at the same time, there's a ton of freedom. Like, I'm really proud of what the whole team's doing for the arc that I've started writing on. It's just super fun, and it's like, I get to do a lot of crazy stuff. Like, we can make it super violent and super funny, and yeah, it's just been really great. And I hope my first issue, which is issue 19 in March, I hope people dig it a lot. I think it's really fun.
You share a comedic violent sensibility in my mind a lot with the Coen brothers. And do you ever find yourself, when you're writing some of these sort of comedic violent moments, like you go, oh fuck, that's too much? Like, do you ever find yourself sort of having to step back because you're sort of thinking maybe, I guess I'm asking, do you ever sort of think about the level of violence that you're depicting?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Curb Stomp, for example, when I say it's ultra violent, I don't mean like, it's not like Invincible where there's going to be splash pages of people getting their every limb torn off, and it's not. Right. I don't think Curb Stomp is visually too much, and it's not visually ultra violent. I think because Curb Stomp is so real, and there's a lot of stuff that's kind of that we don't show, that it becomes violent, and it's kind of hard to explain. We're thinking of it very realistically. Like, a punch in the face, in a superhero comic, that's just a punch in the face. If you get punched in the face in real life, you're like, holy shit, that dude got punched in the face. Like, that's violent. Like, so we're kind of taking that that approach of realism to it. You know, well, without making it totally dry, but I think that we know everything I do with violence. We know kind of what fits the context of the story we're trying to tell.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think that it's a balancing act, and I never want to be violent for violence sake, stuff like that. And you know, it's funny too. Just a little side note, and apologies for derailing, but there's my favorite fight scene, violent scene in Dave is in like issue, I think it's 4. So mild spoiler alert because it's not out in print yet, but there's a scene. It's been on the internet. Fuck, it's been out for a year. But like,
right.
There's a scene where Dave's fighting an alien and he tears the alien's skin off.
Yes.
and then breaks the dude's spinal column off and uses that as like a sword to kill another. And you know what? I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. That was the one time where like I wrote in the script and I was just like, Valentine, you just go nuts with this. Do whatever you want. And then he's like that, and I was like, that is so amazing. I couldn't have even written that. Like, I wouldn't have even come up with it. So, so what I'm basically trying to say is, if someone ever thinks my comics are too violent, it's probably the artist's fault.
That's good. Yes, blame the artist. I told him just do whatever he wanted. I don't know. He didn't just be crazy.
Not me. Yeah.
Do you find? I'm curious because since you sort of work outside of it, these rating systems in comics these days, I'm kind of mystified by them because they don't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah.
What is your take on that? I mean, I don't understand the difference between a teen plus and a mature book necessarily. Maybe that's just me.
You know, that's an interesting question because, I mean, with Sons of Anarchy, that's obviously a mature book, so we can do whatever we want. Well, I mean, for the most part. And with Dave, we're getting away with a lot because the language, the language, there's tons of cussing in it, and so. But the interesting part where I didn't really think about the rating system before was with Curb Stomp because that I believe is not a mature rated book, which is crazy to me because we're dealing with like really mature stuff and like. And it's more real than any other stuff that I've written. So, but me and the editors talked about it, and like, there's actually no swearing in Curb Stomp, which is kind of bizarre when you think about what we're essentially showing. And I won't spoil what happens in the book, but from the title, you can kind of guess that there's some violent stuff in it.
Sure.
So, but no, it's really interesting to me how you can show tons of really violent death stuff, but you can't say it like shit, you know?
Right.
So, but that's kind of my first like real example of me being like cognizant of the rating system, because up until Curb Stomp, I just done like, well, I'm just gonna write a comic about a lobster that tries to kill himself, or I'm gonna write a comic about, you know, cyber fucking in, you know, it's like I've just been doing all these weird shorts that I didn't even think about rating. I just did it. So yeah, Curb Stomp's the first time where it's been like, oh, okay, we actually have to kind of be aware of the rating system. And that's not to complain at all about the rating. I wouldn't change Curb Stomp at all.
No.
It's perfect. Like, I actually like how there's not much cussing in Curb Stomp, because I think it adds to the kind of subtle era that we're trying to convey in the story. But it's interesting. I like maybe sometimes it's not always the best to just let Ryan go crazy. You might get a little weird. So
how is it working with a group of editors at a place like a Dark Horse? Or what is that experience like? Because I think to some people it would be kind of foreign and non-conducive to their sensibilities. But you just mentioned, and I just want you to elaborate a little bit on it, about the benefits of working with someone who can, as you say, sort of rein in Ryan. Come on, pull it back just a little bit, and
Yeah,
maybe hone your attention somewhere else.
for sure. I mean, working with editors, for me personally, it's been one of the best uh, experiences so far. I think that every editor I've worked with, and I'm not saying this to kiss ass or anything. Every editor I've worked with has been amazing. Like, from like Boom, everyone from Boom, and I've had the privilege of working with like half a dozen editors there, and they're all just amazing. And everyone at IDW has been super great. And I don't think I perhaps worded that wrongly. Like, no, the editor, I've never had an editor rein me in. They've just been like really encouraging and really supportive and just super positive. And it's like, it's like when you write something and you proof it to yourself, you're proofing for spelling mistakes, and you look at it 10 times. Yeah. And you're like, oh, there's no spelling mistakes, and then you show it to one person, and the person's like, oh, there's a typo. Now, that's not to say at all that that's what an editor does, is just look at typos. Right. I'm using that as kind of an analogy for, like, they see the things that I can't see because I'm so, I've been staring at this thing and I've been immersed in this thing for so long. So they see things, like character motivations and where the story's going to go, and making everything better. So I think that, all the editors I've worked with, they just want to put out the best possible book, and they know how to do that, by helping everyone involved. So I've never had an editor yet give me a note or a suggestion that I've disagreed with, and I'm sure that'll change. It has to change, but I've just been really lucky to have really passionate editors, I think, that believe in the work that I'm doing and with the teams that I'm working with. So it's been fantastic. It's been, it's really, and I've learned a lot from them, and it's just been really pleasant. So editors, if you want to work with someone who will do everything you ask them, email me. But no. I think, yeah, it's all been fantastic. Like, it's just great.
I want to ask you about this because you do have it on your blog, and it's come up in conversation lately among comics message boards and on Twitter and around the comics news. This Push Comics Forward thing that started. I didn't expect it to cause... When I read it, I didn't really feel too much about it. I just said, oh, well, that's nice, like that. And then within a few hours, I'm reading people going kind of crazy over it. Sort of what's your take on it? And if you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, I'm just kind of curious about your sort of position on it.
Yeah, totally. My position is very much like it sucks that we have to talk about it. It sucks that we have to have a thing that's like, in a perfect world we wouldn't have to have this conversation of representation in comics and stuff like that. I mean, that being said, I completely support it. I think that it's like, yeah, we should push comics forward. We should be doing all these things, and I think that I don't understand any of the backlash, because it's like every publisher should be saying this exact same thing, And there's been lots of publishers before Boom that have been doing it, that have been saying it, like Image has done it and they've said it, and stuff like that. And Boom happened to step forward and kind of release this MO, so to speak. But I people that kind of talk shit on it, I don't really understand. It's like every publisher, every creator should be saying this kind of thing, or should be thinking about this thing or discussing this. Like, it's I don't understand the backlash of opening a conversation. I would rather it's a hill I'm willing to die on, is to make comics better and more inclusive and represent more people and reach more people, and I want more people, of every race and every gender, every identification, every class to love and feel like there are comics for them. So, yeah, I mean, it's haters gonna hate, right? Sometimes. So.
Well, I think. I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I could talk for another 8 hours about it. I think I've made my point. Is that like I totally support it, and I think especially with like Curb Stomp was one of the books that was named in the the initial dialogue that was put out, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to have a book that's a little bit more inclusive than a bunch of white dudes punching each other. So that's cool. I mean, but at the same time, it's like it's not something that it's like, oh, good, Ryan, here's your cookie, like for being basically the lowest common decency, So I think that in a perfect world we wouldn't have to have this conversation, and yeah.
No, and I agree with you. I think it's interesting because we're in a time of and I've brought this up with other guests and sort of talked to them about it as well. Because my own feeling is that I'm pushing 40. I've seen a couple of different comic book movements, and I'm curious because to me we're sort of living in a new, more open age with comics, and I love it because there's so much choice and there's so much variety and there's so many different ways to get them, and the conversations you can have with people, and most importantly, and maybe I've not said this in previous interviews, but the types of stories that can be told, and to me that's just the most important, is that I want to read good, interesting, diverse stories. There's a place for Oreo cookies.
Yeah.
I know where it is. It's not fucking going anywhere anytime soon. So, you know what I mean? Like, I can sit there, I can walk into any shop in America, and when I travel, my wife and I, when we travel, she's such a good sport, because she's just like, you're going to go find a comic book store. I'm like,
Yeah.
So, I just like to go in, and I like to get the feel of what's going on. So I don't know. I guess in the end, I just, like I said, I agree with you, and I don't quite understand. I understand some of the negativity, but I don't understand it. So,
right.
Yeah. So before we get too deathly serious here, Ryan.
More farts and boners here. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Farts and boners. Yeah. No. I wanna.
If I had a boner that farted, I would probably die. That's the single most funniest thing in what I could ever imagine is a boner farting. Like, life would.
There it is, right there, folks. Make it happen. Put it online. Yes, write that story. I want to ask you. We'll get out here on this question. Give us a few of the books that are most interesting to you right now that you're reading that you could recommend.
Oh boy, this is the moment where I completely blank on everything. I'm trying to think of my comicsology list. I really enjoy. I'm like trying to think of all my friends, like so I don't. All I can think of is what I've read recently. I really enjoy Bitch Planet.
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's really fantastic. I really enjoy Five Ghosts. Is really good.
Yes.
That's real good. And I'm gonna forget a million things. You know what? I'm gonna pull up my account right here.
Okay.
Bear with me. My apologies. Because I know as soon as I hang up, I'm gonna be like, oh man. A million books, like that's my I probably read a book the other day and I was like, that's the best book I've ever read, and then I forget all about it. Oh yeah, Pax Americana, that was amazing.
Yes.
I'm gonna quit reading comics after I read the book. I was like, well, Moon Knight, I'm really enjoying. I don't read too many of the superhero books, but I love them still. Southern Bastards is one of my faves.
Now, was the Moon Knight, was that the Warren Ellis?
Yeah. I've been enjoying that, and I'm enjoying the Brian Wood ones as well. I really, really, really love Southern Bastards. That's kind of one of those books that I wish I had done, but it would be 1/28th as good as Jason Aaron and Jason Latour. And last but not least, God Hates Astronauts is probably. I remember I read the God Hates Astronauts the first volume that Ryan Brown put out, and then because he put it online, and then Image collected it. And I read it online, and then I got the Image collection, and I read it in one sitting. This was last summer, and I was laughing so hard that I was actually crying. And I think I gagged a few times because I was crying so much, but it was like, it was the good gag, you know? That sounds gross, the good kind of gag. But like, it's like, yeah, I think God Hates Astronauts is probably one of my favorite series of all time. I don't even want to say of the last decade. I want to say period, since the inception of mankind.
Well, that is a very bold statement.
Yeah, you know what? I think I've chatted with Ryan Brown a couple times, and I told him that to his face once, and I think it was too much.
Did he back away slowly, like walking away?
Yeah, like
it was like staring at you.
Yeah, it was a bit much, but yeah, that's to me, like God Hates Astronauts is just amazing. That's just awesome.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out tonight and spending some time with us. Can you hang out one moment more while I wrap things up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you to my guest tonight, Ryan Ferrier, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Feel free to share the show via Google+, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. As with every show, as soon as the broadcast is over, it automatically uploads to the YouTube page that I archive all these on. So it's pretty much ready to go in about 5 minutes, and I usually repost the link as soon as the show is done for everyone. So you can share it as you like it. Please do. If you want to contact me on Twitter to ask me about the show or just to chat, talk comics, movies, what have you, I'm always down. You can contact me at JLDPROD2002. You can contact Ryan at Ryan Writer. And also visit, of course, his main blog page, the Doughboy Times, in the various, go to the Challenger Comics site, go to Comixology, go to Boom, order this man's work, read the work, love it, live it, make it happen, people. Thank you again to Ryan tonight for joining me, and thank you all for joining us tonight, and be safe, everybody.